Fresh Perspectives is brought to you by Traverse City's Hang Workshop, offering social painting classes featuring step-by-step instruction for creating trendy home decor pieces. Sign up for a class online at hangworkshop.com. Hello and welcome to Fresh Perspectives, where we talk with Northern Michigan residents who take familiar topics but look at them in a fresh new way. Today, our topic is one that's difficult for most people to discuss. It's death and dying. Now, because it is so difficult to discuss, that's why Traverse City-based nonprofit Golden Intentions was created, to help make it easier. Kim Morse is the president and CEO of Golden Intentions. She's changing the way we think and talk about end-of-life issues because everyone experiences death one way or another with loved ones and eventually firsthand. Kim, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, the journey that began you on the path of shining light on death it's a pretty strong one. Can you please share it with us?
Sure. About 6 years ago, in 2011, I began to become ill with not a lot of indication as to what was happening in my body. There were several misdiagnoses, and after about 4 months, there was a moment when I remember telling my husband, I said, I think I'm dying, actually. And his immediate response, which is a normal one, was, no, you are not dying. We are going to figure out what this is. You're going to be fine. We just have to find the right doctor, the right test, the right something. So about a week later, I had a test, and what it revealed was that I actually had colon cancer. So I was 39 years old with colon cancer, which was a huge shock to our family. Mm-hmm. In an interesting way, it was a relief because there had been so much unknown for months and so much pain and discomfort and so many emergency room visits in a strange way, it was a relief. But then what came after that was the reality of the severity of where my colon cancer was. And so they said, without immediate medical treatment, you may be dead within 3 weeks. You have a tumor. It is rapidly growing. We need to take emergency action. And so the recommendation at that time was for me to get my affairs in order, and then the doctor said, we will do our part medically. You need to do your part and get your affairs in order. And so then we'll see you in a few days for emergency surgery. And it was, I had a beautiful team of doctors around me. And coming home, I remember thinking, well, what does get my affairs in order mean? I am 39 years old. And the other part of that, I remember saying to the physician, I thought I had 30 more years before I had to think about this. Now, at this point in my what is now a career, I am appalled by my thought, but I absolutely understand how I got to that point and thinking, oh, I didn't really need to think about this until I was in maybe my late 60s. So that journey through surgery and cancer, what it did was several people came to our aid as a family, including a very good friend of mine, Danielle, who became my patient care advocate. What happened at the beginning was when I was filling out advance directives, or an advanced planning document that we use up north, or we have used in the past, called the 5 Wishes. I remember discussing it with my husband, and he said, I don't know that I'm going to be able to uphold all of your wishes. I love you, but I may try to keep you alive much past the point where you're comfortable. And so we brought in our friend Danielle, and she agreed to be a patient care advocate. And surgery was successful, and clearly I have lived. And so that part is beautiful. But what happened with Danielle and I was we continued our conversation about death and end of life long past all my treatment. And within the next couple of years, we just realized that what we wanted to know was, why was it so difficult at the moment of needing to do some advanced planning, why did we really have no idea where to turn? We had a document, but we didn't have much else beyond that. Mm-hmm. And what came to light was the fact that we are living in a society that is very afraid of talking about death, and that really doesn't have the language to talk about it. It's not necessarily that people don't want to talk about it, we just don't have the language. So it
makes it difficult.
Makes it difficult.
Mm-hmm.
If you and I want to talk about the weather, or we want to talk about even politics, we have a shared language that we can at least operate in. But when it comes to death, if it has not been cultivated since you were young, it's very hard to start it, and it's really difficult to start when you're needing it the most and you're sick. That's what I found. I found that starting conversations about the end of life when you are very ill is very difficult. So, as the years went on, Golden Intentions was eventually created as an end-of-life community resource so that people had a place to go that was safe and neutral, and they could request information, they could ask for some community resources. We could just be that spot in the community where people were safe talking about death. That's
amazing. It's such a vital resource for our community to have, and I, for one, am extremely grateful that you took such a traumatic experience that you went through and you've turned it into something incredibly beautiful and influential to so many people in our area. So just a personal thank you for that.
Thanks.
Now, say someone, they need, you talked, let's start with this. You did talk about how we don't have the language, and that's one of the reasons why it's difficult to discuss death. What are some of those other reasons why it's difficult?
Sure. Well, in general, our society, let's say we look back 100 years, death was really a part of our life. Then families were much closer geographically. Mm-hmm. When someone was sick or dying, it was happening in the home. Maybe a doctor or a medical professional would come to the home to care for the person. They would live out their final days, and the rest of the family life would continue on around that individual. So death and just normal mortality rates, a woman would have 10 children and 8 would live, and so the other children would see death more frequently. Well, as time went on, and as technology improved, and as the medical profession just boomed, especially I would say around the 60s, when nuclear medicine was invented and X-ray, and we were able to really see in the body, our life expectancy changed tremendously. It went from around 48 or 50 up to 60s and 70s, almost overnight. And so we really haven't had an opportunity to catch up with that. And now our life expectancy is into the 80s for sure. So when our medical technology was increasing, what happened was death was taken from the home and it was medicalized. It became an event that was not necessarily something shared by the whole family, the ins and outs of it, but it was put over here. It was put into a hospital or into a facility, and it was sort of sterilized too, because it became a lot about trying to control death as opposed to just allowing it to happen. So what has happened over time is that we have began as a society to expect to live. Every day we get up and we expect to live, and other societies don't necessarily feel that. So the further away death gets pushed from our vision, from our experience, and even nowadays, if someone is dying, we may go and visit them briefly, and then we go home to our safe life, and we start to see death now as the worst possible thing that can happen to someone. So when that is our thought, when we're thinking death is the worst possible thing that can happen, that death is purely a medical event, it becomes very removed from people. And so, of course, we're not interested in engaging with it. Mm-hmm. In some of the workshops that we've done, we've asked people, give me the first few words you think of when I say the word death. And instantly it is pain, suffering, sadness, dark curtains, unknown. And so who would want to talk about that? And
Right.
that's it. It can be, in our society, it appears to be a scary thing when actually this body is going to not exist someday. And the sooner that I get in touch with that reality and I tell people around me, I'm okay when this happens, no matter when and no matter how, it may actually lighten the experience for people around me. So there's a lot of reasons why we got to this point of being afraid to talk about death, being afraid to engage with it, being afraid to look at it. Mm-hmm. And we're here as Golden Intentions to just shine some light on it and to not say, you people, you better be doing this different. We understand. We understand how we got here, and now it's just time to just sort of lighten it a little bit so that maybe some families can have a different experience going forward.
Sure. Now, what are some of those ways that you help lighten, that you help people overcome?
Sure. We have a workshop that we offer that's called the Golden Conversation. And what it does is it encourages people to look at their own experience with end of life and to just explore their own reactions to death. And so we sort of start with that. And then we move through in the workshop and we ask people to reflect back on maybe some areas of grief that are unattended to. How did you do with death? How did you react in your life? What did you take from a death, maybe a recent one or a significant one? And then we go through and we say, we encourage people just to see how important it is to actually talk about the end of life all through your lifetime. People wonder, when should I start planning for end of life? Well, you should start planning right now is our recommendation. Right now, we all have stories in our own existence of when somebody died quickly or tragically. And if there was no planning involved, if there was no conversation ever, if people had to make decisions for someone, it can be extremely traumatic and it can leave some lifelong scars in families. So we encourage people in our workshop to consider who are the people, who's in your golden circle of support? Who would be there if something were to happen to you tomorrow? Who would be your people? And do they know that they have that role in your life as someone who may have to be a decision maker for you? And then we move through something called the Golden Acronym, and this is just a step-by-step process of getting yourself ready for the end of life, no matter when that is. And that includes things like deciding what a good end of life might look like for you. It's interesting when we ask people, what does a good end of life look like for you? Mm-hmm. And most people have no idea. There's crickets.
They hadn't even thought about it.
No, they hadn't thought about it. And truthfully, it's because they never really allowed themselves the space to say, what would I like this to look like? Mm-hmm. Now, many people's quick answer is something like, I want it to be fast and painless, and and I want my loved ones around me. Oh, okay. Well, that is a lot of people's dream, is to be in the garden and to, have a heart attack and die, or something quick and painless, and maybe they just got done with a big family reunion and saw their loved ones. That's not very common anymore because we've done so much to extend our life. We're taking a lot of medications and we're doing a lot of things to increase our livelihood and our just our age. Mm-hmm. And so chances are a lot of us are going to have a slow progression of organ failure, and eventually we will be in a bed being cared for 24 hours a day. So knowing that is the truth for many people, what would you like it to look like, we ask people. Where would you like to be? Most people say they'd like to be in their home. And if you'd like to be in your home, you have to plan for it early. You have to have a home that can accommodate it. You have to have caregivers. So there's a lot of things that people don't realize. They might just say, I'd like to die in my home. Well, what does that actually look like? Because most people, about 95% of us will need 24-hour care at the end of our life. So where will your caregivers come from? Who will it be? we just encourage people to really think a little bit broadly about the end of life and about preparing. So in our workshop, we work through that, and then at the end of the workshop, we encourage people to consider how they remember people when they die. I ask people to think about what happens in their life when someone does die. Are they the person that sends the card? Do they make a meal? Do they go to a funeral or a memorial service? Do they step all the way back and not engage for a week, a month, a year? And all of it is okay. I just ask people to imagine their death, and if they have cultivated a process of remembering people when they die, many times when that person dies, they will not feel as if they're going to be forgotten at the end of life, because they've cultivated this practice of remembering people. And so it's a beautiful workshop. Again, it's called The Golden Conversation.
Excellent. What are some of the other services that you offer too?
So we actually do something, we have two more celebratory services. One is called Golden Hands Transport, and the other is called a Golden Celebration. So a Golden Celebration is a celebration that we encourage people to have before they die. And so it's an opportunity for that individual to be able to, either face-to-face or in proximity of a group of people, to be able to say their goodbyes. One of our women that we had a golden celebration for said, it was the most beautiful goodbye party I could have ever imagined. Mm-hmm. And everyone who has had a golden celebration has said the exact same words. They have said, these have been the most beautiful days of our lives. Like, this day of saying goodbye to our family has been the most beautiful day of my life. And that was amazing to hear.
Absolutely.
And then the other service is something called a Golden Hands Transport. We just had a transport in Grand Traverse County a couple weeks ago. And this is where, when someone is near the end of their life and they have a final destination that they want to go to locally, but usually when people are at the end of their life, it's very difficult to transport them. Mm-hmm. They're uncomfortable, their family's uncomfortable moving them into a vehicle. And so we coordinate with local EMS agencies to be able to get that individual to this destination. And it could be church for a final time, it could be going shopping, it could be back to their home just for one last visit. Mm-hmm. In the case of this recent transport, it was a woman whose family was having a golden celebration for her, and so we were transporting, or we weren't transporting, but the agency was transporting her to her golden celebration from her home. And so it was just a really beautiful event, and that's what Golden Hands Transport is for, and that's free to the individual and their family.
That's
for
incredible.
Our community. Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. Everything that you are providing for people, you are taking the hard thoughts, you are making it easier for people to explore the end of life. You're giving them things to think about, some very specific things, where they can go back, they can reflect, tell you what they would like to do, and you make it happen.
Well, what we do, sort of our final wrap-up service, mm-hmm. is something called the Golden Conversation, and it's with the family. So Wonderful. When an individual or a couple, once they've kind of got their advance directives in order, mm-hmm. have a general plan of what the end of life would like to look like for them, we come in as a neutral body, and we can facilitate a golden conversation with friends and family of this individual. And really it's just a way to make sure that everybody understands what they're asking for, and just to see if there are questions, mm-hmm. or also just to make sure that people agree to uphold their wishes. Because when an individual gets to the point where they're no longer able to say what they want or what they need at the end of life, we're hoping that these individuals in their life, this golden circle of support, that they're able to uphold what has been discussed. And that seems to be a really critical component of end of life, because many people have to make emergency medical decisions that are really potentially life-ending decisions for family members. And if they have no direction on what to do, the consequences of that decision may stay with an individual or a family for years and potentially generations, and it can be devastating to family dynamics. So we're just trying to get a little bit of conversation going so that when the time comes, the individual's wishes are fresh in our minds.
Sure, sure. So you recommend having these conversations, having these plans set in place before the time comes to that where life ends.
To the best of our ability. You know, I wish we could say, well, we have plans A, B, C, D, and E, and that should be enough. And then something happens that's completely out of the ordinary, or not that anything is really ordinary, but anything can happen. What we do know is talking about death, just that simple thing, talking about death in whatever way you can, is beneficial to the family and to the individuals. And we have to start somewhere with changing this paradigm that death is the worst possible thing that can ever happen to anyone. Because if every time we hear about someone's death, our reaction could be on social media, or it might be to another person, is, oh no. What you're doing is saying, I can't believe somebody has died, when in fact, we are all going to die. And that one fact alone, us never talking about that has a deep and lasting effect, and it keeps getting passed on to our next generations, that death is a horrible, terrible thing, when actually it really is the one thing that we came to do in this world. We were born to do this one thing, and that is to die. It's the one experience we will all share. It will look different for all of us, but we will all share in it. And the fact that we're not talking about it, we can see the effects of it all around us. So we see our death as the final gift that we will be giving to our friends and family. And no matter what, so your gift may look really messy, or your gift may look tidy and in a bow and filled with love and filled with understanding. And so you really get to decide what that looks like at no matter what age that is. It could be, at 39, it could be at 89, doesn't matter.
Oh, well, goodness, Kim, thank you so much for sharing your fresh perspective about death and end-of-life issues with us. We sincerely appreciate it here at Up North TV, and I'm sure our viewers do at home as well.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. And thank you for joining us. We hope that we'll see you again.